Good evening, members and officers. I don't believe we have any public here tonight. Welcome to the Cabinet meeting on the 18th of November. Fire alarm procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, vacate the offices via the stairs. Please do not use the lifts. Assemble in Hawley Square on the Green. Officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. Please switch off or turn to silent your mobile phones and do not make or receive calls whilst the meeting is in progress. Please note this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and will subsequently be broadcast on the internet. As there are no members of the public, I assume there's no filming. The following members have asked to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1. Item 4, Councillor Keane. Item 5, Councillor Everett. Item 8, Councillor Yates. Item 9, Councillor Yates. Item 10, Councillors Austin, Auburn, Garner and Yates. I have received apologies from Councillor Bob Bayford and Councillor Pugh. Does anyone have any interest to declare in the items of business on the agenda this evening? Item 3, minutes of previous meeting. To approve the summary of recommendations and decisions of the Cabinet meeting held on the 23rd of September 2021. A copy is attached to the agenda pack. I propose that we approve the minutes. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cupp. Do members agree? Item 4, events policy and suitability of events. To introduce Councillor Cupp.
Thank you very much, Chair. The events policy was introduced in 2016 to provide guidance and support to event organisers while identifying the Council's processes. Since then, a review has been undertaken of this policy and the event process to ensure TDC are operating in the most efficient way for both TDC and event organisers. The events policy terms and conditions and suitability of events documents have been designed to streamline the process and help organisers find information quickly. TDC wants to ensure that the process is clear and easy to understand to encourage people to organise events in the Thanet area. There are 6 main changes to the new documents. Number 1, there are 5 main changes to the new documents. Number 1, organisers are now required to read and sign the policy showing they understand all TDC terms and conditions. Organisers are asked to think about CO2 emissions and how they can be reduced. Update to fees and charges to ensure a fair charging scale for different size events. The introduction of a suitability of events document, which outlines how the Council makes the decision on events. And lastly, the inclusion of brand promotions on TDC land to go through the events process. Events contribute to the local economy in Thanet District. There have been over 230 events in Thanet over the last few years, with a reduction due to the pandemic. This is predicted to increase in 2022. Due to the recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, which created the perfect opportunity to introduce a policy that is easy to understand along with a clear charging framework. The policy outlines the importance of safety, identifying that events need to be COVID-19 compliant and that organisers need to be thinking about reducing carbon emissions in line with the climate emergency called by TDC in 2019. The new policy and supporting documents will be supported in the introduction of a new administration system that was recommended by a number of Kent councils and will ensure a better customer experience. I propose that Cabinet agree option 3.1 of the report, which is to adopt the events policy to include the suitability of events document and new fees and charges, and that we formally agree that TDC liaise with town councils and Margate trustees, informing them of events happening locally. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cupp has moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Jill Bayford. Councillor Helen Keane to speak under 20.1.
Thank you. Heather Keane, but yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to commend the report, and particularly clarifying and simplifying the process, because it used to be particularly difficult for smaller events, and I think the process now is much more streamlined for them. But there are 2 points that I would like to raise, and the first one is there is a lack of clarity in the document still about the beaches and whether they're included or not, or only out of season, because they're certainly all included in the table of event spaces, and I just think that needs tightening up so it really is clear from the beginning if we are using beaches, when we are using them. And secondly, obviously it's very disappointing there were only 10 responses in feedback that you got from people that had held events in the past. And as there's going to be a debrief after events, can that information be collated to form better information in future about what's working or not with this policy? Thank you.
Thank you. And would you like to respond, please, Councillor Cole?
Thank you, Councillor Keane. On the beaches, I'll pass over to Penny on that in just a second. But regarding to the responses and the debrief around events, I think that is definitely an idea to have, and something that should take place to ensure that any events that are going on we can learn from and improve on, or even see what comments that are positive from how we have been holding events. So yes, I think that is definitely a very good suggestion.
Thank you. So yes, in terms of the beaches, we have looked at that, funnily enough, this evening, because we are aware that there was a problem in the report in terms of 2 options. So the beaches side of things is that we will not be looking to have new events on beaches during the summertime. However, we will look at each individual event on an individual basis. The reasoning behind this is we are getting more and more calls every year to have big 20, 30,000 person events on Margate Main Sands particularly, as well as places like Joss Bay, and we just don't have the capacity during the summer to hold events like that. So it's making sure that what events are being put on are in line with the area. So that's the situation with beaches. So yes, there won't be a whole summer ban, as we may have kind of put in the policy. So that's not technically correct, and we'll make that change before we publish it.
So you're happy if we make those amendments? Do members agree their recommendations? Agree. Item 5 is the procurement of housing service contracts. To introduce, Councillor Jill Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. The Council is committed to improving the standard of homes across the district, including the homes that it owns and manages. We are also committed to working with our tenants and leaseholders to deliver this commitment. The re-tendering of our cleaning contract, which, have I got the right one? Yes, sorry, which provides the regular cleaning of entrances, bin areas and internal communal areas of all our council's residential blocks of flats, provides an opportunity to review the service provided and to work with our tenants and leaseholders to select a suitable contractor for the coming 2 to 4 years. Budget provision is already in place to support this procurement. Since transition of the service to the Council from East Kent Housing, the Council has provided twice nightly security patrol service in each of our 6 tower blocks. This was initially an interim measure to assist in managing fire safety in these blocks, but have proved extremely effective at identifying and responding to a range of issues, including rubbish and other items left in communal areas, noise and antisocial behaviour, blocked rubbish chutes and activators of firearms systems. The patrols record and report all issues through to the Council's housing management officers so that any follow-up actions needed can be arranged. It's therefore proposed to procure this service on a longer-term basis. Budget provision is already in place to support this service. In addition, the Council is currently providing 24-hour interim waking watch services in 5 of its tower blocks, which are fitted with external wall insulation. The purpose of the waking watch service is to assist with managing fire risk within these buildings, ensure that the alarm is raised immediately in the event of a fire, and assist with evacuation. These blocks are due to have upgrades to the alarm systems, and the Waking Watch services will be required until these alarm upgrades are completed. The Council is working closely with Kent Fire and Rescue in relation to fire safety, and we have already jointly tested the Waking Watch service procedures in relation to our evacuation. The inclusion of this service within the procurement is subject to the approval of the necessary budget by the full Council. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Saunders. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Everett.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Unlikely as it may seem, I'm Councillor Whitehead this evening. Unfortunately, she's not very well, so she sends her apologies. She couldn't be here to speak herself. I don't have anything very complicated to say. Councillor Whitehead did tell me, however, that when this was discussed earlier, I think during the Labour administration, there was some idea of weighting the contract towards local suppliers, towards local businesses. And I noticed that the report doesn't refer to that. It does talk about the more economically advantageous submission, although it talks about quality and cost analysis. So I just wondered how far we're going to be able to take into account where these businesses are based, because obviously the people who are going to do the work are going to have to be fairly local because they'll have to be here. So it would be nice to support local businesses if we can, if any thought's been given to that. I will say, you know, I do have an interest in this as a Newington councillor in particular, because Stanner Court's in my ward. And obviously it's absolutely essential that we have this Waking Watch service, and I'm sure we would all put the safety of our tenants as our absolute #1 priority. I just wondered in terms of the cost of this, because it is a lot of money. Obviously the budget's got to be approved, but I mean ultimately this does fall on our council tenants as a whole through the HRA. And is there any thought that we can recover any money for this Waking Watch service from the government? I know there's discussion about the capital financing of the improvements to the buildings, but are our poorest residents, not just in the tower blocks, but our, you know, the people who live in our social housing across the district, and they're not all poor, but a lot of them will be more deprived. Are they paying the price for this? Because it has come out of the HRA, and are we trying to recover it from government? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to come back on that, Jill?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Everett. I think that Bob Porter will be better informed than I to answer this question. It's a very interesting one. Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Councillor Everett. So two things. Firstly, in terms of local procurement, yes, we support the use of local contractors wherever possible. So we're more than happy to explore with our procurement team, you know, how we can encourage submissions from local contractors in that process. In terms of the funding, you're absolutely right. The funding is coming from the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan, funded by tenants and leaseholders. We have explored with the government whether there was potential to bid to support that service, and so far there hasn't been an opportunity to bid for any funding. But if there is one that comes up, we would certainly be looking to take advantage of that.
Thank you. Also at Cabinet, we did discuss for a long-term plan whether or not we would actually want to take on the cleaning ourselves within the council under our overall banner, which would obviously save costs and also provide an income, if you like, reverse income back into the council. So it was discussed. We didn't feel that that we had enough lead time to actually put it in place, but it was discussed, and it is planned to have a close look at that and cost benefits for the future. So do members agree the recommendations are in the item? Agreed. So item 6 is procurement of works at Churchfields. Again, to introduce Councillor Jill Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. This project is the demolition of existing concrete bin stores and canopies at the Churchfields flats and for the provision of 35 off-street parking bays for residents. The bin stores and canopies are past the end of their useful life and have been boarded up and unused for a number of years. In preparation for this project, the Council has consulted with the tenants and leaseholders of these blocks who expressed a preference for the proposed project. The funding for this project is already within the Council's approved Housing Revenue Account programme. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor George Cupp. There's no one asked to speak under this, so I propose that members agree to the recommendations. Agreed. So item 7, mid-year review 2021-22, Treasury Management and Annual Investment Strategy. To introduce Councillor David Saunders.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to report that the Council has operated within all of the borrowing and investment lines set out by our strategy for this year. This report shows within 4.2 and 4.3, which are on pages 85 and 86, that our capital spending was approximately 5 million at the mid-year point. This within our revised capital budget of 31 million, but is well below our expectations to where we would expect to be at this point in the year. More detail is provided in the budget monitoring report, which is agenda item 8 of this evening's agenda. Our revised capital budget for the year has increased by about 9 million compared to the original, but the majority of this additional spending will be funded from grants with only a modest increase in borrowing. We currently have approximately 20 million of external borrowing. No new external borrowing was undertaken during the first half of this financial year, but we have repaid 4 million of maturing debt using our investment balances so far. Borrowing may be undertaken during the second half of this financial year, and options will be reviewed in line with market conditions. Finally, I propose an update to our Treasury Management Strategy to reflect the delay in the implementation of the new accounting standards for the leasing of assets. I'm assured that making this change ensures our limits are adjusted to an appropriate level. Leader, I move the recommendations.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cook. Do members agree?
Agreed.
Item 8, Budget Monitoring 2021-22, Report number 2. To introduce, Councillor David Saunders.
Thank you. This report is the second budget monitoring report for 21-22 with an indicative 1.96 million general fund overspend, which is again largely due to the ongoing impact of COVID. The report assumes the use of government funding of £1 million, leaving a net overspend forecast of 0.96 million to be funded from reserves that were set aside last year specifically for this purpose. This report also identifies the latest General Fund Capital Programme forecast for 21-22, the latest Housing Revenue Account position, the need for Cabinet to recommend to Council the decision to provide a supplementary budget for legal costs associated with private sector housing, the need for Cabinet to agree the latest position for the GF Capital Programme, including the need for environments to realign, the need for Cabinet to recommend to Council the decision to approve supplementary capital budgets pertaining to COVID responses, Ramsgate Harbour, Ramsgate Port, homelessness and Ellington Park. The need for Cabinet to recommend to Council the decision to approve a supplementary budget of £896,000 for the Housing Revenue Account to cover the cost of the Waking Watch service at 5 tower blocks, this being until such time as a new fire alarm sounders can be installed. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Jill Beauford. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Leader. Just one comment and two questions. Firstly, I think speak for many of us when say we're very disappointed that the decarbonisation of the Kent Innovation Centre has been that project's no longer viable. But from reading it, it does look like the government set us incredibly tight schedule when it comes to spending this money, and the consultants obviously have, it seems to have potentially had some issues there, as well as inflationary pressures and the cost of materials. So just want to make that point, that that's incredibly disappointing. I think if there are any new opportunities that we can insulate some of our buildings, then we'd go for that, so give that our full support. So on to two questions. Firstly, onto your leisure. There's a mention of a 160k overspend in regard to your leisure. Now, there was I believe, a mention of a loan agreement being set up previously. So I just want to ask what the situation is with that loan agreement that I believe was being worked on. And the second question is the 750k capital program in regarding the public toilet refurbishment. So it doesn't look like any of that money's been spent, and that was predicated on the toilets being sold, some of the toilets being sold, I believe. But now that TDC has taken back the Margate Harbour arm and we are seeing increased income from that, is there any opportunity to use some of that income to fund capital improvements on the toilets within Thanet? Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Saunders.
Firstly, can I say that we're all disappointed with regards to the events where we were looking to improve our insulation, etc. You're absolutely right. The grant money that was offered did come with conditions and time restraints. You're absolutely right that the consultant, given market forces, got the figures wrong, and I think anyone that's been involved with any building works will know that materials in short supply and the popularity of heat sink boilers, etc., has meant that we're now in a situation where it's supply and demand, and we simply run out of budget and time on that issue. But we're extremely disappointed, and obviously we'll be looking for other areas where we can make significant improvements. With regards, if I can move on to the toilets, you're absolutely right with regards to toilets, and my colleague on my right is currently working on a toilet strategy, and I'm waiting for him to come forward with the figures involved with that toilet strategy so that we can look at it within our budget to see where we come from. And I've forgotten the other question, sorry. Oh, your leisure. The loan is still in place, but I don't know if Chris Blundell behind me can give us an update with regards to the exact position of where we are with your leisure.
Certainly, Councillor. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Councillor Yates. Just for clarification, the £160,000 shortfalls because of unachievable prior year savings that were agreed. Conversations are ongoing with your leisure in terms of the amount of support that's needed to provide to keep them stable and operating, and all avenues are being explored at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Do Cabinet agree with the recommendation?
Agreed.
So item 9, fees and charges 22-23. Back to you, Councillor Saunders.
Thank you. An initial review of the fees and charges has now been completed as part of the 2022-23 budget setting process. This has included the review of the proposed fees and charges by the Cabinet Advisory Group, and the recommendations are detailed in the report for Cabinet's consideration. Key changes have been detailed within the agenda pack in 1.4. The review of fees and charges commenced in the early summer, and proposed fees and charges were based on a broad 2% increase. However, as the fees and charges setting process developed, it has become apparent that inflation is significantly higher than our 2% baseline that was applied for next year. Only yesterday, the Consumer Price Index for October was announced at 4.2%, the highest rate for a decade, and it is forecast to peak close to 5% over the coming months. The Council is not immune to these inflationary pressures, pressures rather, as we too face increasing energy and fuel bills. As such, it is important that we are able to set our prices in line with an increasing cost base, but also balancing this against market conditions and the ability of our customers to pay. Consequently, I propose a revisit of our fees and charges assumptions for next year, and that we apply a 3% increase instead of the 2% that you'll find within the paperwork you're looking at this evening. Subject to the approval by Cabinet colleagues, the fees and charges schedule will be updated to reflect this and be presented to Council for approval on this basis. I move the recommendations.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cook. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Leader. Apologies. Once again, one comment, two questions. First comment's just about the pilot scheme for the parking charges for electric vehicles. Fully support that, and I think that's a really good move as we go forwards. So on to the first question. This is just about the £55, which is mentioned for green waste. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the actual Excel spreadsheet, it's £54. And can you just confirm the price increase has moved from, is it £53 to £54? So I'm just wondering whether this was meant to be on the front page of the report, and what could have been intended to be on the front page of the report is actually the bulky waste collections, which has gone up from £26 to £30, which is a 15% increase. But I don't know if I'm wrong there, but if you can clarify that. So that's the first question. The second one is just about the 3% increase in fees and charges. So I think if it wasn't for the 691k budget gap, then Labour would not be in agreement with increasing the fees and charges. But considering the national picture, and as I'll go on to on the next agenda item, local government's just not getting the money it's needed. And because we need to fill in the 691k budget gap, this 3% increase will actually reduce that. So it means we'll have to make less cuts. So although we're not very happy about it, we won't oppose that 3% increase in fees and charges. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to be able to say that we could look at it positively and remain with the 2%. And one must remember that the increase is not across the board. There are large swathes of fees and charges where there's been no proposal of increases whatsoever. The £54 to £55, if I recall rightly, was a decision of the Cabinet Advisory Group, a recommendation. And the bulky waste, I put my hand up. I proposed that increase, having used the bulky waste collection service in the past. And given that you can have 5 items and or 25 bags of general rubbish removed for the £26 as it was previously, I thought that was a very, very good deal, and I didn't see an increase from 26 to 30 being over the top. In fact, when I looked at it, I thought we could go higher, but I really want to promote that because it does overcome fly tipping, etc. And I think, you know, anyone with any sense would look towards their neighbours and say, this is a damn good deal. If you've got a fridge or an old cooker or a heavy item, I'll book it and you put it with mine. And the service is excellent. I have to say I've used it 2 times in the last year. You put the bulky items out at the front of your property and they're collected normally before 7 in the morning. A superb service, and for £30, 5 items, I think that's an absolute bargain. Thank you. Have I answered all the questions?
I believe so.
Thank you.
Yes, and I'd just like to add on that if you buy a new appliance, then they charge you 25 quid to take it away. So, and they're making the profit out of you buying the new one. So I would second Councillor Saunders' comment that it is a good value for money service, so and to be encouraged. So,
And I once again apologise for the increase, but I think you're absolutely right. Given our financial situation, needs must. Thank you.
so it's been proposed and seconded. Do members agree? Item 10, Budget and Medium-Term Financial Strategy 2022 to 2026. To introduce, Councillor David Saunders.
I've worn my finger out on the Google. And lost my page. Thank you, Leader. This report gives context and explains the approach to setting next year's budget. The financial projections in this report come with a health warning. They are based on the best estimations of our financial staff on the latest impact of the budget announcements, all of which are subject to change. Although early indications on funding for the forthcoming year are positive, the full impact of the announcements will not be known until settlement is received in December, and as a result, the report highlights the delicate financial situation for the Council. Apart from government funding, there are inflationary pressures in the region of £1.1 million each year, which cannot be covered by increases in council tax and fees and charges alone. Table 1 in paragraph 3 sets out the overall picture. It projects a budget gap of 0.691 million in 2022-23. I would emphasise again that these figures are rough projections, and I know I speak for the Section 151 officer in giving this caveat, but it's clear that we will need to start rethinking how we deliver services over the medium term. Section 9 of the report identifies some options for further exploration to help contribute to those savings over the medium term, and the recommendations contained seek Cabinet support. 2, 1, approve the strategy. 2, provide direction on how to bridge the budget gap. 3, that Cabinet commits to the development of a long-term saving plan that exceeds £2 million to help bridge the gap over the medium term. I move the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. And seconder, Councillor Cupp. Speaking under 20.1, I have Councillor Austin, Auburn, Garner and Yates. So Councillor Austin first.
Thank you, Leader. Can we thank, first of all, the finance team for this report, which is depressing, but easy to understand even for those of us who are not finance people, and contains some really useful projections at different levels of income. The first thing I would want to say is that I do hope that you, Leader, will be making representations via our MP and to government about the fact that we have so little information, that things keep changing, that reductions keep happening in our income from government, because as we've seen with the decarbonisation project, it appears that more and more restrictions are being placed on what we can do, even with money we've bid for, and that doesn't leave us or any other local authority in a very comfortable place. I wanted to start on income because obviously there's been a focus on savings here, and I'm wondering to what extent we can expand our income in other ways. For example, how much of Councillor Cupp's toilet strategy can we get Southern Water to pay for? It strikes me that we should be getting Southern Water to pay for all our public lavatories all around the coast, including building some new ones and the maintenance. We really need to be looking to them for reparations for what they've done, and I know you've been working hard on that, Leader, but I really would want to push on that. And I'd also want to look at how we can generate more income via sponsorship from local firms and so on for different sorts of activities that we're involved in. Moving on to spending, I am concerned, obviously staffing is a major cost and we have to look carefully at staffing, but I am worried about the deletion of some of the roles that we have found hard to fill, particularly in frontline services like waste and open spaces, because that's going to affect adversely the experience of residents, and we already have difficulty, and I know managers are really struggling sometimes to cover those services. And we had an extremely useful and constructive couple of meetings of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel's Coastal Waste Working Party recently, one with parish and town councils and one with voluntary organisations, and I wondered to what extent Cabinet was considering looking at the ways that we work with parish and town councils and with our voluntary groups, and whether there might be some way of helping to balance the budget by arranging more maintenance contracts with those organisations. I was worried about the fact that we've got quite a lot of staff off sick in those areas as well, and obviously we have to make special arrangements for them if there are to be redundancies, because the last thing we want is any other sort of legal case. And finally, I wanted to looked at the proposals of reorganisation of the senior leadership team, and I wondered if the senior leadership team had considered a voluntary temporary salary reduction. Many of us who have led organisations through austerity have found ourselves having to offer this. It is not desirable, but on the other hand, it does help save money, and it does generate a feeling of we're all in it together. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. If you have to come back on that, Councillor Saunders.
I'll come back on the ones that I can. I can't comment on the senior team. What I can say is that when we're preparing the budget, we rely on the budget holders to come forward with their proposals, which we can challenge. But on the question of not filling long-term vacancies, our advice from the budget holder was that we can reorganise to cover that shortfall. And obviously from a financial situation, once a budget holder comes and tells you that, then you accept it and you inbuild it into your figures, etc. With regards to the situation with parish councils and town councils, I can tell you that we are already in discussion with regards to certain asset transfers, etc. And within my colleagues' toilet strategy, which we've yet to see published, there is an indication, and a very strong indication, that we will be looking for partnership arrangements with both parish and town councils and commercial outlets as appropriate. I think the only other one is the senior, which I really can't make any comment, Chief Executive, on that one. Have I covered all of the points? Thank you.
Yeah, I think if Chief Exec can come on and also cover the sickness levels as well, I think was raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, first point in respect of the point raised around vacancies, stroke deletion of roles. I think obviously, yes, we are looking at those vacant posts. I think we're looking at those that have been vacant for a period of time and reassessing those. I think we're in a situation where difficult decisions have to be made, and our preference is obviously, which I'm sure you would understand, that we'd rather look at vacancies rather than make other people redundant. So that's why we're exploring that, but no final decisions have been made about that at this point. In respect of, I wasn't quite sure I understood the point about people being off sick and redundancies. The two are not related at all, quite rightly, they shouldn't be. So just to reassure you.
I was thinking about the special protection that people off sick have in those circumstances.
Absolutely, and obviously in respect of any restructures that we may look at, obviously we now have our in-house HR team, and obviously we'd be involving them, and obviously we'd be seeking their advice about how we approach any such such issues, but obviously that's not something that's on our agenda at the moment. In respect of the senior management team, I wouldn't be proposing that, just simply because we often have these conversations, and I'm sure you appreciate through employee council with the unions, this does come up from time to time, and albeit I do recognise the principles around why people would suggest it, I think I also have to balance that as head of paid service against the fact that actually senior officers work very hard. When we've previously assessed the market rate that our senior officers have paid, it's not been comparable to other areas. In fact, it's been lower. And I think we just have to recognise that we need to retain people at a time when things are quite challenging, and I think that would be quite a disincentive if we started to go down that road. So I won't be, just being honest and upfront with you, I wouldn't be recommending that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Saunders, coming back.
Yes, I don't believe I covered the item on income. What I can tell you is that we at Cabinet level have been looking at innovative areas that we could perceive would, in time, generate additional income. But unfortunately, those areas do come with a risk. And whilst we've been preparing this budget, we've adopted a budgetary prudence attitude. But we will be looking at areas where perhaps we can look to get some guaranteed income without the risks that we've incurred in the past with such innovative ideas. Thank you.
And I can come back on the Southern Water. As you know, that there was an original payment by Southern Water which has been ring-fenced to be used for the benefit of the communities. I'm still working on the concept behind how that will be spent, which we can detail very shortly. But I've also, since the Joss Bay event, asked for other sums of money, and just waiting to hear back on that. Needless to say, I will push as hard as I can, and toilets could obviously come into effect. But I think, you know, we should really be looking more of a strategy to make it sustainable rather than relying on Southern Water. I just pray that we don't get any other leakages. So I don't really want to be reliant on Southern Water bailing us out for the shortfalls on our services. But needless to say, if I do manage to obtain some further funds for them, then they will be to the benefit of the community. Next to speak under 20.1 is Councillor Auburn.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, just to go back, I also have concerns over the loss of jobs and the getting rid of posts. I'm specifically concerned in relation to the waste services, and I'm specifically further concerned about we did through the hard work of Mr. Waite a year or so ago in getting through the budget 10 environmental operatives, 5 of which have been employed, and I'm hoping that the other 5 posts that weren't filled are not going to be got rid of. I think it's extremely important that they are retained and filled. And the reason I'm saying that is because in each of our public consultations, the response from the public is in relation to waste recycling, keeping our streets clean, etc. And the environmental operatives were put there, enable us to impact on the issues that are raised by residents in specific areas that where there might be fly tipping, or there could be anything like that, which we could react to. So I'm extremely concerned about that, and I could not support that, and I'm sure my Labour group colleagues would not support that. We would not support the budget if that happens. And obviously, I've also seen in there that there is growth of £402,000 for waste in the report. So it does seem rather ridiculous if this is the case, that we get rid of 5 posts and yet we put in £402,000 in. I know it's not as simple as that. I understand that, but that's how it looks. That's how it looks to the public, and certainly, Chair, you know, I would certainly hope that you would look at this and change your mind in relation to these posts being extinguished. And thank you ever so much. Thank you.
Councillor Saunders, you want to come back on that?
Yeah, as I would again say, and you probably know this from your previous experience, we do rely on the budget holders to come forward with their proposals. What you're talking about in sitting in my seat is strategy rather than budget. And it's a strategy that's been prepared, and I have to accept it from the budget holders. I agree. I'm very disappointed that we've had these vacancies for the period of time that we have and haven't managed to attract the people that we need. But we'll see how it pans out. But at the moment, the budget, as presented, and all of the figures that we have been received. We've received them in good faith from the budget holders. And as I say, maybe the strategy needs to be looked at, but I'm sure the figures that come out at the end of the day, I will insist that they're unchanged, irrespective of whether there's any changes to the strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Executive wants to come in.
Yes, if I may. Thank you, Leader. Just to say, obviously, Councillor Auburn, appreciate the points that you are making, and you're right. Obviously, there's a bit more context to the detail, and I think, obviously, we take on board that maybe we need to look at how we represent some of that, if indeed we go down that route as part of the final budget decision. But as I say, because these are proposals at this stage, principles which we are seeking Cabinet support from. But also just to remind people, from a staffing perspective, obviously that's my remit as Head of Paid Service. So ultimately I make the decisions around what resources we need as an organisation to deliver the services we have. So clearly we are looking for Cabinet support around the principles that we use in respect of the budget. Of course, that's absolutely right. But from the staffing perspective, clearly, that's something I have to give some consideration to in respect of within the budget that we have available, how we best deliver the services. Thank you.
Also speaking under 20.1, Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, as has been mentioned by a couple of people, this is obviously a worrying report for all of us, and especially for all residents of Thanet. Of the 3 scenarios that are discussed in the report, when even the neutral one sees us getting within just £1 million of the minimum acceptable level of reserves in the next 3 or 4 years, I think it's important that we understand some of the risks, some that could move us towards the pessimistic scenario, which would see us diminish our reserves to an unacceptable level. And some of these risks I couldn't find mentioned in the report. The first of these relates to some of the matters we've discussed quite in depth, really, relating to the recent Section 24 report, which highlighted potential costs of £700,000 plus. Has the Cabinet member and a Section 151 officer been able to identify the additional saving plan to address the further cost pressures created in resolving the grievance and whistleblowing complaints yet, as per one of the recommendations in that report? And the second area of risk, which I didn't see mentioned much in the report, relates to the finances is the port. Has an assessment been done on the added costs faced as a result of the recent withdrawal of a marine licence application relating to Burst Form 5 and the additional costs these further delays will result in? Thank you.
I suspect there'll be various that need to come back on that, but if you'd like to kick off.
Well, I was just going to make, I was just going to say that as chairman of the IDSC and an individual that is waiting for an interview with the IPP, I really can't comment on your first question. And with regards to the port, I think the leader or indeed the chief executive are in a better position to answer those. I don't know if Chris wants to come back on the first point, but I trust the figures that have been given us so far with regards to your first point. I think they are correct at this point in time, and obviously they've been inbuilt. Can I just go back on the free grids? And as Councillor Yates will know, I tend to be a pessimist. So the grid that I was working at, the table was table 2, and losing sleep at times over that table 2. And we've gone with the positive one rather than the what I consider to be over-optimistic one. But I'm keeping everything crossed that we can deliver in all aspects of what we've prepared and what we're proposing. Thank you. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Garner, for your question. In terms of the risks, as Councillor Saunders set out, within the different scenarios, it sets out the different factors that could be varied that would potentially bring us towards that most pessimistic scenario. Stuff that's been discussed at some length this evening around inflation rates, our own income, our ability to generate income, but fundamentally it's around reform of the local government finance system and something that's actually outside of our control. And we'll be watching very carefully to see what the government announces in terms of reform that'll be forthcoming as part of the local government finance settlement that we hope to receive early next month. In terms of the additional savings that came out of the Section 24 report, within the main body of the report, there's a section that sets out at just under 3.1, talks around the overall budget position that summarises the gap at 691. Right at the bottom of that table there is a section for reserve movements, and you'll see a contribution of reserves of £180,000, and that reflects the recommendations that have been made from Grant Thornton in terms of finding funding. So the budget gap already accommodates £180,000 contribution to reserves over a 4-year period that would help to restore balances back to the level that were required to fund those costs that have been provided for.
Okay, Chief Executive, you want to speak about the port?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, in respect of the port and the specific references to berths 4-5, just to confirm what you already obviously appreciate, that the Council has withdrawn its submission to the Marine Management Organisation for a licence with the intention of resubmitting a new application in line with the requirement to have an EIA. The current position is that the project remains still within budget. There may be a small additional cost as a result of having to resubmit, but obviously a lot of the work that was submitted as part of the original application will be retained, so we're obviously minimising any additional costs associated with that. But just to reassure, it is within budget. I can't tell you at this stage what that additional cost would be, but we have already accounted for it. But I'm happy to find that figure and share with you.
Just to add that I will be making a statement tomorrow regarding that, just to clear up the matter so that it can put people's minds at rest, outlining the position. Next to speak under 20.1 is Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Leader. So 3 questions here. So the first one's just about, as mentioned, this table, the optimistic, pessimistic, neutral table. So just to highlight what I think is pretty incredible, really, that by 2025 to 26, in every situation, we're looking at a £2 million budget gap. And this reiterates what other councillors have said tonight, which is we do need to be thinking about income generation. So an idea that has been going around a long time, but we still support it, is the idea of beach huts. So Whitstable recently sold off their beach huts, which we would not agree with, but they went for 90 grand each, and I think the cost of building it would be much, much lower than that. So I think, like people have mentioned in the past, Ramsgate is a potential place for building beach huts, so that would be something we'd support. So I guess the question is, can we consider income generation separately, because we can't just be talking about cuts. Second point is just around the report and clause 3.7, because it's mentioning 2% increase in fees and charges, but the separate report we've just discussed is mentioning 3%, so just want some clarity on that one. And my last point is just around beach management plans. So during the pandemic, Labour kicked off the beach management plan, and we did that early in the season, so that the toilets were open, our beaches and portaloos were prepared for a large influx early on in the season. I think it was March, April time. And I think I've got concern. It'd be good to get some clarity about whether that beach management plan can be introduced again this year, as I believe we will, well, next year, as I believe we will have again a large influx of people coming to the beaches early on in the year. And because I think if it isn't introduced, we could see chaos on our beaches once again. And if it's not going to be introduced, then we definitely need some clear comms early on about that. So we've got a large, big question mark about whether the beach management plan will be part of this budget going forward. Thanks.
So, would you like to come back, Councillor Saunders, on the...
I think, yeah, I mean, I've already, thank you, Rob. I think I've already come back with the income generation ideas. We have discussed a number of ideas, and we've also looked at beach huts and exactly what we could do with beach huts. There's difference of opinions with regards to beach huts, whether they are going to be, if you like, basic or luxury, and whether we are going to carry on with allowing people to pay for a pitch, or whether we want to look at a long-term solution of having permanently based beach huts, as they do in some seaside resorts, which will generate quite considerable income. Beach management plan, to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure, but whether that's still in there, and I don't know whether Gavin can assure me on that point. I do believe it's still there, because we have had discussions on the beach management plan and how it pans out, but I think we've got plans for a dual role of some of our operatives, but perhaps Gavin can elaborate.
Yeah, Gavin, if you'd like to come back on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Actually, officers are reviewing the plan from last year, obviously lessons learned. What we need to consider is the intention is to bring the plan forward into next year. As you can appreciate, and you sort of indicated, is there's a resource issue, because lots of the activity was paid for from government funding through COMF and some of that. So we're just looking at different ways of working, but it is the intention that we will be reviewing it. Also the PSPO as well, and the benefit of the PSPO. And I know we've had some feedback in terms of some other activities, enforcement activities we could probably include in the PSPO as well. So we'll be reviewing that. And then also, I know it's been indicated that overview and scrutiny, there's a group going to be reporting to overview and scrutiny. I mean, it's predominantly with regards to beach litter management, but it will be reporting into overview and scrutiny, and then they'll be recommending some improvements, working on what we've done in the past, what we've done in the future, also like been speaking to local community groups, local businesses, and also they're going to be speaking to other local district councils as well about how they carry out that activity. So the intention is that we will have a beach management plan for next year, and the resources to at least implement as much as we can.
I think the 2% to 3% report to come back on as well.
Yeah, once we get a sight of the revised fees and charges with the increase in those areas that we will be looking to increase, then we'll review our overall situation and then build it into our final presentation to council.
And I'd just like to reassure members that I spend most of my time trying to think of ways to generate income and inward investment. It is my main concentrate and priority. Maybe some of it is a little bit risky, and so I have to balance that off against what would be deemed to be acceptable. But I can assure you, I know that our assets, our main asset is 18 miles of coastline, and I really think we totally underutilise that as a revenue stream. So certainly a lot of thought will be going into that, and a lot of proposals. That yes, you're quite right. I think beach huts or even overnight stays, call it what you like, maybe not Airbnb, but CB&B, I've renamed it. So I think we could probably charge about £200 a night and get away with it. So you're quite right. Whitstable, I think they missed a trick there, to be honest, but rather be making money out of our assets rather than selling them off. I don't really want to sell the crown jewels off before until we really completely run out of money. So no, very much concentrating on that, and the Cabinet are very much behind that thought process. We can't keep cutting back the costs, so we've got to work out how to get some money in, and all for any suggestions coming forward on that. So if anyone's got any ideas, members, then bring them forward. No problem. Thank you.
And if I could add to that, one of the things that we're looking at is the word hut. I think that in your mind's eye, when you say a beach hut, you've got a certain picture. So we're thinking more, luxury pods.
Anyway, I don't think we've actually we've moved and seconded it. So do members agree? Well, I believe that concludes the business for tonight, and I declare the meeting closed, Charles, and the live stream will now end. And thank you, members and officers, for attending, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.